Drama unfolding at the French National Assembly, a bit infused with an air of all or nothing. François Bayrou's gamble on a vote of confidence to rally support for the painful austerity budget that he championed backfiring. It's not the debt that's, by the way, spooking Europe, but the all or nothing attitude. First, the Prime Minister. Critics of the 74-year-old center-right mainstay point to his unwillingness to use the long summer recess to negotiate a compromise that would sway a parliament that's split three ways. But the all-or-nothing mindset runs across those three big blocks on the left, the middle, and the far right. As for the president, his all-or-nothing move, you could say the original sin of this impasse came last year, when he reacted to a poor showing in European elections with an unexpected dissolution of the legislature. Rather than jolt followers into voting for him, Emmanuel Macron's party losing seats a year ago. And today, rather than ceding power to Parliament as predecessors did when they were in opposition, like Jacques Chirac, like François Mitterrand in his day, Emmanuel Macron still trying to weigh in on that budget battle. So what now? He either picks another PM and calls another snap election 2 days before a yellow vest-inspired national protest, and less than 2 years before citizens elect Macron's successor as president. We're talking about the fall of François Bayrou in the France 24 debate. With us, Yves Saint-Omer, professor of political science at Paris 8 University. Your books include The Government of Chance, Sortition, and Democracy from Athens to the Present. Thanks for being with us.
Hi.
Political strategist Hin Zian is with us, the founder and CEO of consultants Génération Politique. Good to see you.
Thank you, François.
Gérald Olivier, research fellow at the IPSI think tank, author of Cover Up, the Biden Clan, America, and the Deep State. How are you?
Good night, good evening.
Richard Verly is the France-Europe correspondent for the Swiss news outlet Blick, author in French of The Illusions Ball, What France Thinks, What the Rest of the World Sees. How are you?
Fine. Seems the ball is stopping at the moment. Nobody is dancing anymore.
The illusions are over.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
By the way, you can always listen to the show. That's right, listen to it wherever podcasts are streamed. Again, that vote of confidence happening just minutes ago. And according to script, François Bayrou, a mainstay of politics for generations here in France, is out at age 74 after just 10 months, less than 10 months in the job. He said before the rostrum of the National Assembly, before the vote, that the biggest risk would have been not to take one. His last-ditch attempt to convince that he's the adult in the room, and his speech laden with seafaring warnings of a brewing deficit storm. All right, he said in his speech, and I'll read you what he said, Yves Saint-Omer. He talked about being the captain of a leaking ship. Let's take a listen.
As captain of the ship, aware of the lake that is constantly widening as water floods our holds, I say that our duty is first and foremost to immediately set about plunging it, and to do so together. If we want to save the ship that we are on, that our children are on, we must act without delay.
Il faut agir sans retard.
Yves Saint-Omer, that's a pretty dark picture there. This is a ship that could be sinking. What are your thoughts when you heard that speech?
I mean, the ship could be sinking, but I'm not sure the captain had a real idea where to go to avoid the ship sinking. We are in a situation where there are three blocks. It's not possible to govern with just one of them. There was no real attempt to make a compromise with one of the blocks which doesn't sustain the government. So the government was minoritary, and what is happening now was very, very probable. And I would like to add that it's not only a political question, because during these months, the higher civil servants who govern the state, who should govern the state, were completely left without any credible perspective for the future. And when you speak with them, they said, there is no captain in the boat. And so the situation is really dark.
is really dark in Xi'an?
It is, and it's been for some time, to be honest. And I think France's problems are almost systemic. And we've been talking about this for decades of not addressing real issues and not finding solutions to real problems. So this is going to be something I believe that we're going to have to fix in the next couple of months, next couple of years. But going back to what happened since 2024, it was unfortunately expected, very much expected. And the question is now that we have in 1 year had 2 prime ministers, soon a 3rd prime minister. What is the plan? Is
Markets
there a solution or not?
Today, the Paris stock market was slightly up, and bond yields were okay.
Markets trust France because France is traditionally and historically a country that investors trust. But it doesn't take anything from the fact that it is very unstable today. And if it keeps going like this without an actual solution to this problem, which is a long-term systemic solution, then the markets eventually, it's not maybe not going to be tomorrow or the next day, but eventually the markets are going to stop trusting the system, and the system today is actually broken in France.
There was a hint of, I told you so already in that speech earlier from François Bayrou, Gérald Olivier, where he said he was happy that he was able to force this conversation over the budget deficit. But as to Yves Saint-Omer's point, that the French are still figuring out what parliamentary democracy is and how you negotiate. Is that a work in progress, or is it a lost cause?
Well, what's happening is not supposed to happen, or was not supposed to happen, meaning we shouldn't have the instability that we've had since 2024. The institution of the Fifth Republic were designed to take over the Fourth Republic, which itself was mostly parliamentary and extremely unstable. And you would have government that would last less than a year, exactly like what we're witnessing right now, 2 governments in about 12 months. So the French are not necessarily used to that situation. But my question is, when Bayrou talks about the sinking ship, and he's not the only one to compare France with the Titanic, by the way. And if you talk about a sinking ship, might as well name it the Titanic.
Over the budget deficit.
The question is he talking about his government? Is he talking about France? Because to me, there are 2 different things. And there is a disconnect between the private sector and the public sector. And the private sector is not doing so poorly, which is why the markets are hanging on pretty well. The public sector is France's main problem. Beyond the political schemes of finding out a majority, which to me is impossible at the time. Therefore, the solution is not to name a new prime minister. The solution is to call for new parliamentary elections, and let's see if the French are then able to decide.
Is it the question of the private versus the public sector, or, and again, this is a statement that Bayrou made when he was interviewed by broadcaster TF1 a couple of weeks back, is it an intergenerational problem? A huge lag with the fact that he said, he talked about the comfort of boomers, that we're having a bigger and bigger deficit, all for the, quote, comfort of boomers.
Well, he's a boomer
in
himself.
an aging Europe, is that the real dichotomy here?
It's part of the problem. To me, the real problem is a government that has been overly generous, because when you're generous with voters, they vote for you. But gradually you sink the countries, and he's responsible for that. In that interview, there was a journalist, Sonia Mabrouk, who actually had a major argument against him, saying, you have voted for all the budget that have created the deficit we have today, so don't you share part of the responsibility? The responsibility is always the voters, because they can always vote for someone else. But the responsibility also lies with the politicians who, year after year, have driven France into the hole where it is now.
Richard Verdi, this question of where you spend the money when you have an aging population and a shrinking tax base, it's one for all of Europe. We've seen how in Britain, the Conservatives, the one thing they never touched was pensions.
Well, the challenge you mentioned, especially regarding pension, is true. It's very much accurate. But as far as France is concerned, the main issue is the fact that structurally, the state is spending too much money. That is, it is a structural problem that France doesn't manage to address. François Bayrou has said it in his speech, and he has said it in the past. For 51 years, the French government has not been able to put up a balanced budget. 51 years. So it's more than one generation. It's about 3 generations. So it's a structural problem. This is a country where you have roughly 26 million of people working, and you have 6 million civil servants or people who depend on public money. One out of 4. That's way too much for a country that has only 1% economic growth, and 1% is a generous figure. Now, is this the fault of Bayrou himself? No, I think courageously, let's put it this way, courageously, he has told the truth. He has painted the picture of where the country is now. Did he do that to, let's say, sculpt his own political figure, maybe because he's looking for the presidential election in 2027? Possible. But the painting that he just produced is accurate. The country has a structural problem that should be addressed.
But you heard Yves Saint-Omer say he went about the politics part of it wrong. There was no negotiation over the summer.
I think it's true. And as far as I am concerned, I've been knowing François Bayrou for quite a while, and I was surprised. I thought that because he is a centrist, because he is a person of compromise, he's been in the past, because he has always tried to be a bridge between the right and the left, he would be the proper person to put up a coalition. The fact is, he did not try. He did not try to forge a contract between the different parties, and that is main political mistake. Now the question is, was it possible? Or did he avoid it because he is looking again at the presidential election in 2027? Keep in mind, he's been already candidate 3 times.
All right, and we're going to cross back in case you're just joining us on France 24. Moments ago, the government falling. France 24's Clovis Cazelli is at the National Assembly, and we're now in an interregnum, Clovis, where we're waiting to know who François Bayrou's successor will be.
Absolutely, and the situation now is very clear. Emmanuel Macron needs to find someone who can get consensus here at the National Assembly to pass laws, to pass a budget. And I'm joined here by Nicolas Bonnet. He is an MP for the Green Party, so for the left-wing bloc, for the Puy-de-Dôme, which is in the center of France, near Clermont-Ferrand for our viewers. Nicolas Bonnet, are you happy? Are you relieved? François Bayrou is out.
Yes, I'm happy that François Bayrou is out, and that now the National Assembly no longer trusts him. But I'm also concerned because we have to build something new, a new government with a new Prime Minister and quite fastly a new budget for next year. So it will be quite difficult because we have seen in the past year that it was complicated to make different party, different groups in the Assembly to discuss together, to build a compromise. So I'm not quite relieved.
So what can happen next? For our viewers around the world, what can happen next? Can it be a government, say, with a socialist prime minister and left-wing figures like the Green Party, but without the radical left of France en Bas? That's out of the question. Yeah. Who would that alliance of left-wing parties govern with?
I think Emmanuel Macron needs to invest prime minister from the left wing, because the left wing win the election 1 year ago. But by winning, I don't mean we have the majority, but we were the wing with the highest scores, so we were legitimate to govern. But he didn't make that choice a year ago, and I think now he has to make that choice. Probably it will be socialist or maybe an ecologist, I don't know, because we know that the far left wing doesn't want to participate. But I think now we have to nominate a socialist or ecologist, a member of the left wing for the prime minister post.
We know that the French president has been talking, or his entourage has been talking with left-wing figures in the past few days. I'm sure you know that also. Have there been contacts between the French presidency and also the Green Party to see what kind of alliance and who would want to go in this government?
As far as I know, there were no contacts between the president and the Green Party. So
with the socialists?
Maybe with the socialists, but I don't know. I think it was difficult for some dialogue to be created before François Bayrou was officially out. So I think there will be more contact now. I hope so, because we have to discuss. We don't want Emmanuel Macron to nominate someone from his own party like he did before, because we don't think it will work. It will be the same fate for this Prime Minister as it was right now for François Bayrou. But the exchange will start, I think, right now, the official one.
Nicolas Bonnet, Green Party MP for the Puy-de-Dôme, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And as you've just heard, contacts, negotiations are set to take place in the coming days, because it's very simple. President Macron now needs to find someone who can pass laws, pass the budget here at the National Assembly, because otherwise the only other solution are snap parliamentary elections, and that's an option the French president wants to avoid by all means.
Tavis Kezeli will be crossing back to you for more reactions. Many thanks for that. It was interesting to hear that member of parliament saying that there had been no contact, as far as he knows, between the president and the leadership of his party. Again, if the president names another prime minister, let's look at the equation. 577 seats in the National Assembly. There's a so-called middle bloc to which Bayrou and Macron's parties belong. That's mainly the part in yellow, but there's other bits too there. You can extend it as far as the blue part, which is the conservative Les Républicains. And there you see the left, which, as he said, has a stake in, has a claim to being named prime minister, because when they had formed an electoral alliance last year for the second round of legislative elections, and they had the biggest bloc. But now there's dissidence between the hard left, the France Unbowed Party, and the others, the France Unbowed Party, which wants the president, not the prime minister, the president to resign, and the others who would be amenable to governing if there is a platform that suits their needs. Yves Saint-Omer, again, it's this question of whether or not France can do parliamentary democracy. And by the way, in a parliamentary democracy, most others, like the case they're voting today in Norway, it's the party that gets the most votes that gets the first shot at forming a government. That, in France, would be the far right's Marine Le Pen, by the way.
Yes. Not with this result coming from the last year elections. The left united was...
How about now that they're not united?
Yes. So if there are now elections, it is very probable that the Rassemblement National, the national rally, will be first, will come first. But at the time being, the left remains the...
So if you're the president today, who should Emmanuel Macron be calling on? Somebody from the left, someone from his main center bloc?
I mean, there is no clear answer, no, because there is no clear majority within the parliament. France is not a parliamentary system because the president has the most important power in this game. There is no cultural use of making coalitions, and above all, in 2 years, there will be new elections. 2 or 3 years, there will be new presidential elections. And no political leader, be them in the center, in the right, in the far right, in the left, wants to appear as somebody moderate, somebody who has no real project, an alternative project for France. So the possibility of finding an agreement is very limited.
Is it not what the socialists have done in recent days? Straying from what was originally, we're part of a left-wing bloc that goes from the hard left to the socialists, now stating we're okay with being with getting the nod to run the next government if there's compromises.
Yeah, there is never lack of ambition among politicians. It's wonderful to observe. But your graph was fantastic because it was clearly an indication that the left, even united, doesn't have a majority on its own. And without the LFI, the unbowed, as it's called in English, it's even worse. So if President Macron is to name a new prime minister, it will have to be somebody from the center that can get agreement from the socialists as well as some from the center right, the same way as Barnier has been, the same way as Bayrou was. This is the only mix that can function today, because the two extreme parties, France and Bayrou, the LFI, the extreme left, and the Rassemblement National, have decided that they would not join such a coalition unless they were at the head of it, which President Macron is not willing to do at this stage. So we're back to the starting point. We have a government or an assembly which is ungovernable, with no majority, no dominant figure able to link everything together. And even if Macron manages to find somebody, it'll be for the same thing. We'll do Barnier and Bayrou again, and all the problems that have driven us where we are will remain on the table unsolved.
Rinse, wash, repeat?
Yeah, it's like trying to run with a broken limb and then thinking about running a marathon eventually without even actually finding that solution for the broken limb. I think we're just like, it's sort of an endless circle.
Really? Because twice bitten, isn't the third time Macron going to be shyer and perhaps try to widen the coalition?
Honestly, look at it in terms of mathematics. If you look at the assembly, so France in 1958, when the Général de Gaulle tried and wanted to give this country a stable government, his goal was to give it something that it hasn't had since the French Revolution, since 1789. And the question was, do we give more power to Parliament or do we give more power to the President? And because we've tried Parliament during the Third and Fourth Republic and it didn't work out so well because there was a lot of instability and government eventually fell and the Republic fell, he chose one person, the President. And that's why the president is chosen directly by the French people, because that's what provides him legitimacy, enough legitimacy to be above parties, above partisanship, and to take and to make these decisions that are important for the country outside of any partisan thinking or partisan ideology. So that's the rationale behind the Fifth Republic. And today, thinking that you can, with this kind of system, which is a majority system, that the legitimacy rests upon majority, that you can actually govern without majority is just completely, it's an illusion. It's not going to work. So there are two options. You either have another election and you have a clear winner, like really clear winner, like what we've had before during our cohabitation, or you have a new presidential election before 2027. Basically, this is something that can't be solved without something extreme, because the National Assembly is broken in three parts that do not speak with each other. So eventually, no matter how many prime ministers you're going to get, no matter how great they are, you're going to have the same outcome, which is government toppled after a couple of months.
All right. As any self-respecting European politics junkie will tell you, they voted in Norway in a general election this Monday. The Labour Party of Jonas Gahr Støre expected to finish well below the 85 seats needed for an outright majority. Instead, same as last time, he will cobble together a coalition, Richard Verly, with four other smaller parties. Why is coalition building, as Hind was just saying, impossible in France?
Well, it may seem ironic to say so in such a dramatic day, but I think maybe coalition may become possible now. I am not sure at all, but I would be rather more optimistic than what was said. I think two differences have to be taken into account. Number one difference is that before the Socialist Party, let's say the Social Democrat, was linked to the radical left, to France and Bayrou. They did not want to govern without the support of the radical left. They are now ready to do so, at least they say. And their condition is that the Prime Minister comes from their ranks. Now you may find some personalities who are not members of the Socialist Party directly, but who are considered as friend of the Socialist Party. One of them is the former Prime Minister, Monsieur Cazeneuve, Bernard Cazeneuve, who was at some point received by Emmanuel Macron. So he may come again, and the Socialists then will probably be willing to talk. Now, the second thing that you have to take into account is that all parties who have governed in the past, the traditional right, the conservative, the Socialist Party, even the Green, the Central Party, the Macron bloc, those parties know perfectly that if they go for election now, they may get wiped out, especially by the National Rally. So their immediate interest is to stay in power, to govern and to forge the coalition, which was not possible before. So I would like to put a more optimistic tone. If there is a time when in France a coalition and a contract between governing party is possible, it is now.
Well, I think, first of all, in my opinion, you can't change centuries of political tradition overnight. We're not Germany. We're not Norway. We're not just going to start having coalitions. We couldn't even have coalitions in times of peace and prosperity. I think it's going to be very tough to have ones today. It doesn't mean we're not going to find fixes. It doesn't mean we're not going to find short-term solutions. But in terms of long-term, structural, systemic solutions, I don't think it would come from a coalition, because that's not part of our DNA. And what used to be said by the first Republican is that France has a Republican heart. Actually, it's quite the opposite, has a Republican brain, but a monarchy heart in terms of it likes authority, it likes one president making the decisions and one person making the decisions. So I think it's going to be hard for us to make a coalition. However, we might have somebody who has enough legitimacy, and that comes through votes and only through votes, and who can actually find a long-term solution to this problem. So I think if we want to fix the system, we have to go back to the root of the system, which says we need legitimacy through one person, and that person could become the next president or somebody else that becomes also prime minister, but through the president's choice.
Yves Saint-Omer.
I mean, the system is broken now. I mean, the Fifth Republic was never conceived to be democratic. It was conceived to be efficient, and it is no more efficient. So we are in a situation which goes much beyond the problem of the last year or the last 2 years. Imagine the socialists make an alliance with the center and the center-right. Next year there will be municipal elections in all France. Most of the cities which are governed by the Socialist Party are governed in alliance with the rest of the left. It will be a complete mess for the socialists if they accept this. So we are in a situation where it is very difficult to get out of the mess. We have to also recognize that even in European countries which have a tradition of parliamentary system, in a lot of countries there are problems. We have to remember that in Germany, a couple of months ago, the coalition between 3 different parties broke, and the state of the present coalition is not that good after a couple of months. So we are in a big crisis where we have also to look forward and see what is not going well in our French democracy, but also in our European democracy.
Is it about French and European democracy? Well, let's cross to the National Assembly again, and France 24's Clovis Casali. One party at the National Assembly, Clovis, not calling for a new prime minister, but an actual change of president, and that is the far left, French Unbowed.
Absolutely. France Unbowed, the radical left, the far left party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And I'm joined by one of their MPs, Madame Lejeune, from Essonne, which is just outside of Paris. You're an MP that must be extremely relieved, happy. How do you feel after this vote that sees François Bayrou out? He's no longer Prime Minister of France.
Well, I think what's important to remind is that asking for the confidence it's the normal thing to do in a functional democracy. So this vote was long waited for. The government of François Bayrou had no democratic legitimacy. So in a way, this is a huge victory for the French people, because several times they had voted against Macron's policies, and several times we've had prime ministers and governments that have been pushing through policies of that same type. So today it's a victory for the French people, and this victory we hope can carry on Wednesday, when the movement of the 10th of September will mobilize in opposition to Macron's policies.
So what do you actually want for France? Do you want new parliamentary elections? Do you want a new president? What is the radical left, France Unbowed, really calling for?
Well, we believe this is not just a crisis about the debt. This is a regime crisis. It's a crisis of the Fifth Republic. So yes, we do want another institutional regime. We want to go towards a Sixth Republic. And we also want another president, because it's been shown in the European election and also in the snap elections last July that Macron has no democratic backing anymore. And his policies have been very harmful. Today we've got a level of poverty that is rocketing in France. We have a level of deindustrialization which is also soaring, and all of this is the result of Macron's policies. So today the chaos has been created by these policies, and the only way out of it would be to have President Emmanuel Macron resign, and we could go towards new presidential elections and really have a serious debate about what direction we want to go to.
Obviously, President Macron has always said, I'm not quitting. He's not resigning. That's what he said. He doesn't even want snap parliamentary elections. What he wants is trying to find a prime minister to get some kind of consensus here. If he picks someone from the left wing, your former allies, the Socialist Party, if he picks a socialist leader, and if the socialist prime minister decides, for instance, to reform the pension system, go back on the pension reform, and carries out left-wing policies, could you back that government, or at least not censor that government?
Well, we have been elected on the program of the New Popular Front that we presented together with the Socialist Party last July. And today the direction in which the Socialist Party want to go is in clear rupture with this platform that we defended together.
So you would not support them?
We cannot support a government that would not apply the platform that we have been elected on.
Even if it's a left-wing leaning government?
So they would be obliged to form a coalition with the Macronists, with the centrists, and this is exactly what we've been fighting against these past years. So very clearly we could not back this type of government.
Madame Lejeune, thank you very much. You're an MP for France-Embarde, the radical left party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And as you've just heard, François, no way, they will not back a socialist prime minister. It's not the plan, especially if the socialists have to conclude an alliance with the centrists of President Macron.
Yeah, many thanks for that, Clovis Casali, and Yves Saint-Omer adding another layer of intrigue here with the fact that we are right now almost in campaign mode for municipal elections, which matter a lot in France. Mayors are very popular in France, as well as the president. Lawmakers in parliament, not so much. I want to get you, Gérald Olivier, your reaction to something that Yves Saint-Omer said earlier about the crisis. It's not about the man. It's about the institutions. There's a problem in France, a problem in Europe when it comes to institutions.
It was not necessarily the case 2-3 years ago or before Macron. Macron blew up the system back in 2017, and he hasn't been able to put the pieces back together in a functionable way. The Fifth Republic, I think, suffered from the reform which moved the 7-year term to a 5-year term and put the parliamentary election right after the presidential election. What was supposed to bring stability.
But we see in France the same problem as in a lot of countries like Britain, like Germany, where the big tent parties, which used to be the Socialist Party and used to be what is now Les Républicains, those were ripe for the taking in 2017. That's not Emmanuel Macron's fault.
No, it's the fault of all the politicians that led France to the situation where it was, and that turned out to be rejected gradually by the people. But the idea that most people evolved around the center, and a fairly wider center could bring a majority of the people and be able to govern and avoid the two extremes that they wanted to avoid, the far left and the far right together. That was Macron's idea, and that's why the LR went down, that's why the socialists went down, and that's why the extreme went up. But since the center couldn't hold together, because in fact there is not that much cement that can hold it together, because the important question here, which we haven't really mentioned yet, we're looking at the theater of politics, but the real question is to do what? Okay, the socialists want a prime minister, but to do what? To kick the can down the road some more? Which they would, because once you have to make hard decisions, you know you're going to be unpopular. And that's exactly why François Bayrou decided to commit political suicide because he didn't want to put the budget first. He asked for confidence without putting a budget first, so he wouldn't have to fight for it, and wouldn't have to appear or jettison in some way his chances in the presidential election. So the idea beyond everything that we're saying right now is, what do you want to do with France? And the best way to solve it, once again, is to call for new elections, including maybe presidential elections, even though Macron doesn't want it. If he has France's interest at heart, at some point he has to do the right thing.
Has he?
What?
Has he France at heart?
Well, that's
or
another question.
I mean, de Gaulle was able to resign in some crucial moments because he had some vision of what France should be. I am not very sympathetic with this vision, but you must recognize that.
I agree.
He was a big politician. And now we live in a moment, in a period, not only with Macron, but with at least the last three French presidents, after their elections in 2 years are unpopular. They do small politics, and we're here where we are now.
If I may, I do agree with you. If I may, Sarkozy became unpopular for doing what he was not elected for. Hollande became unpopular for doing what he was elected for, which doesn't work. And at some point, France will have to make a radical choice.
I'm hearing two messages here, and they seem a little mixed, Richard Verly. A little bit, the leaders not being forceful and strong enough, and then we're not giving parliamentary democracy its due. Are the French schizophrenic?
Yes. Yes. Well, the French are always at ease with contradictions. That is something that you know perfectly, François. They have no problem with contradicting themselves all the time.
I do it all the time.
That's right. I do so. No, two points. First of all, I think it's too early to say what Macron will do. He has clearly stated that he will not leave office before the end of his mandate. But as we say here, situation is now a prime minister that has to resign, possibility of no coalition to follow up. So Macron may reconsider what he has said. But at the time, as we speak, he is continuing as president of the Republic. Secondly, I still believe, and I repeat what I said, that coalition might be possible now. It's a pity that it was not done before. There were factors to explain that. Now we will see. That's the moment of truth. This is exactly what Bayrou says. Now, third point, I have a difficulty at blaming politicians. Sorry, gentlemen. But if you have to blame someone, then blame the French people. Not only the politician. The French people are the ones who have voted. They have sent a very fragmented National Assembly. They have voted, some of them for the extreme left, some of them, a large part of them, for the extreme right. So it's too easy to blame politicians. I think that's a tricky game. Politicians may not be up to the task, but the French people have responsibility, and they do have a central responsibility in the financial situation of the country, because the public expenditure that we are focusing, the national debt, where is this money going? In the pockets of the French people, under the form of social aid. And you see nobody in the streets accepting to downside the social aid that they are getting. So there is a responsibility of the French people as well.
We just saw a banner there. That was those were live images from the Brittany city of Rennes, where they're having a farewell party for François Bayrou. Farewell party. I guess they're not sympathetic to him. And you saw the sign alluding to Wednesday. There's this yellow vest-styled protest that was started over social media back in July, and which has ballooned. We don't know if there'll be a lot of people on Wednesday or not, but the slogan, Hinzian, is bloquons tout. Let's block everything.
Everything. I think it just expresses a deep frustration, a deep disillusion by the French people. I wouldn't blame them, actually. I don't think people who vote are to blame, first of all, because the voting system actually gives power to only half of the population. It's not everybody. You can vote for something, but because you're not enough, there's not enough of you, then you're not going to get the win. It's la tyrannie de la majorité, the tyranny of the majority of Tocqueville. So my question here, and I think it really gives a proper understanding of why there's such huge distrust in politics in Europe and in France. The first thing is that I believe there's a huge gap, almost like a crack between people and their elites. There is a misunderstanding. There have been years and maybe even decades of not understanding each other. And a lot of people feel like they don't get they don't understand what I live every day. They don't understand what I have to go through every day. And that's a legitimate answer to politics. That's people want politicians to help them live better, and they are not feeling that. So I think that's the first point, this gap between politicians and between the elites, political elites, and the people. The second thing is that I feel like people want to be protected because the world is extremely unstable. You look at the geopolitical reality of today between all of the blocks, the new blocks that are appearing, that are developing. It feels like we are so late. So a lot of people are worried and thinking, what are we going to look like in 20 years if we have to face the USA or Russia or China or India or Brazil? And I think also that's the job of political leaders. And I don't think French people are schizophrenic. I think, first of all, that humans are naturally prone to paradox because reality is not linear. Reality is not black or white. It's more complicated than that. People want to be represented. They want to have good leaders. They want to have better lives. So they depend on their political leaders and want them to help them. And that is legitimate. That's why people run for office. That's their first goal, to serve the public and the country. But they also want to somehow have a say. They want to be able to say, okay, I don't agree with this, without somebody always telling them, you're not legitimate to say that. Everything is doing well. You're being pessimistic. So I think having those two ideas in their minds, French people are not crazy. They're not being schizophrenic. They're just being people who want to be both protected and listened to. And I don't think politicians have done that properly in the past couple of years. And just to end on this note, if you look at the vote, I think actually it started way before Macron. It started back at Chirac, and even maybe a little bit before. If you look at in the 90s, when some politicians decided that we have to make coalitions with the left when we're from the right, and to let go of some topics like related to security, to safety, for example, or related to the debt, those people went elsewhere and they went to the National Rally. And I have to remind our viewers of what happened in 2002 with the father of Marine Le Pen almost being in power, which was like an earthquake. So this is, for me, the proof that it started way before, and this impossible dialogue between the elite and the people is what really breaks democracies and systems. And if elites don't understand and trust their people and listen to their people, the system will not be fixed. It can't.
Definitely tapping into that vibe was Marine Le Pen. In his speech, the Prime Minister resisting calls from the left to tax the wealthy and calls from the far right to reject cuts in benefits and services, a call that was repeated on Sunday as she staged a rally in her home constituency in the north of France.
This moment marks the end of the agony of a phantom government. The president has only one option: call new elections and let the country choose. And if he decides not to choose a majority, if he gets involved in the campaign, if he steps out of his role as an arbitrator to become a player, he accepts in advance the political consequences in the event of his defeat.
Yeah, in her speech on Sunday, Marine Le Pen stating they're trying to make us pay once again for their mistakes. And she said it before. This is the Rust Belt town in the north of France where she made that speech. Again, this harks to her tuning into that sentiment that Hin was just mentioning, the one of wanting to be heard and wanting to be protected.
Yes, for sure. And I think that a couple of years ago, the Yellow Vest movement, the main political claim of the Yellow Vest movement was we have to introduce what in English is called the citizen initiative, in France, the référendum d'initiative citoyenne, which make it possible for citizens to directly decide through a referendum on crucial issue. It was not introduced in the French constitution. Another claim was also to have a citizen assembly randomly selected. Macron organized this citizen convention on the climate, but the results were not very convincing because the proposals were not really implemented, and then a citizen convention on the end of life. Imagine for this huge reform of the pension system, if we have had a citizen convention on the reform of the pension system, proponing then two alternatives to the French citizens, either one or the other, and then French citizens would have decided what to do. This would have been a responsibility of French citizens, not the fact to elect people who then don't really do what they promised.
Yves Saint-Thomas, you're in luck because we have in our midst a man who's an expert on citizens' referendums. He's from Switzerland, Richard Verly.
Well, as far as referendum is concerned, I think I have even said here in France 24, I was one of the very few to argue for a referendum on pension reform. I thought that even a referendum would have been possible on pension reform.
Sure.
And it would have been possible to propose the French people, are you ready to go for 64 years old, retirement age, instead of 62? So no problem on that.
But because you know the problem was, former French President François Hollande said, the problem with a referendum is you don't know what question the citizens are going to answer.
And the fear is always from the President of the Republic, who is the one calling for the referendum, that actually the French people will vote against or for him rather than respond to the question that is being asked.
But it is because in France, referendum
Yes,
is very rare,
true.
comes from the top, it's not part of the institution, so that when you have a referendum, people vote at least as much against or for the one who asks the questions and on the question. In Switzerland, it's completely different.
True.
And
So having
would
more
be
referendum
one
would
solution.
be clearly a way to diffuse the tension in France. Actually, Emmanuel Macron himself, in his address on the 31st of December, in his New Year address, he suggested that he will make some referendum, but he did not materialize. Now I have a problem with the word protection, because the French want to be protected. In security terms, there is the issue of immigration as well. But when you talk about social protection, this is a country which is overprotected. People are overprotected. I mean, these countries spend a lot in social subsidies one way or another. I am not judging. I am not saying if it is okay or not okay. I'm just saying that it's part of the problem. It's part of the financial problem, because clearly the state doesn't have now the means to finance all the social support. So if French people want to be protected, let's be it, but let's also be clear. At the moment, the French state doesn't have the financial means to continue to protect them this way.
Coming out of COVID, foreign direct investment surged here in France, and many attribute it to the fact that there was good protection for citizens, the whatever it costs policy at the height of the pandemic. Gérard Olivier, do you feel overprotected?
Yes, totally.
You feel overprotected?
Yeah, of course. And overtaxed as well.
Yeah.
And the way I am taxed has an impact on how I feel about my protection. And I think you're perfectly right. And France's problem go way beyond simply pension reform. We have a bloated public sector, and that bloated public sector is both inefficient and costly. And if you managed to cut into it, even a little bit, you would have a country which would be healthier, more dynamic, more productive, and more resourceful, and with more economic means behind. And you might not find yourself with the yellow vest or that movement that whoever is behind it for the blockage of Wednesday, which, by the way, I don't support at all. But in any case, our problem is overprotection. And the idea that for whatever you do, you need to have somebody next to you holding your hand, No, we don't need that. We've forgotten how to do it by ourselves, but we don't need it.
We can see with the UK that when you reduce the public system, you have a country which goes well, where citizens are very satisfied, which looks for the future. So is the solution a bit more complicated than what you say?
I think so, like, personally, when I talk about protection, I think about protection. For me, it goes beyond the social state. If when you look at the Yellow Jacket movement, you have some people who don't make ends meet. That's the type of protection I'm talking about. Having a decent job that pays you well and helps you feed your family. When you look at farmers who are every month or so coming to Paris and being on strike, not being able to work, not making ends meet either, they're not protected. They should be a priority for the government. These are just examples of people in France who are not protected, not in a social term, in a social way of seeing things, which is pretty fair. But I'm talking about actual protection, like having a decent job that pays well, having an education for your children that helps them have maybe more opportunities than you. That's the type of protection that people are looking for. And I don't think that French people, even if we have a social welfare system, want more money from the state. Actually, they want the state to give them a better environment for better opportunities so that they can work and make sure that their children have better opportunities.
And one last point
what we have in common is that they are from the private sector, whereas the people from the public sector are the ones who are also overprotected in their work environment.
Yeah, for me, the public sector is a bit different here, yeah.
But one of the big issues with this pension question is the question that's been posed the last couple of weeks, we've heard it several times in debates, is the money for pensions sucking the money away from things like public education, which is one area where Hinzian was saying you can give people a fair shake if you give them a good public education.
Yeah, it's a slightly different debate. I don't think education is only a question of money. If it were, we would never have gotten to the point where we are. But definitely the public sector is pumping money out of the economy. And it's pumping money out of people's pockets. And it's the people who have the least that end up always supporting the people who have the most and who are overly protected themselves.
I want to go around the room quickly because we're running short on time, just to see, because again, we've just seen, if you just watched it live here on France 24, the French Prime Minister fall. There's this movement scheduled for Wednesday. The president said he's going to act fast, but sometimes Emmanuel Macron can be unpredictable when it comes to how he manages his time. So I'm going to go around the room and get a quick prediction as to what should and what will happen. I'll start with you, Richard Verly.
A difficult week, probably some kind of social unrest on Wednesday with this movement.
Will there be a prime minister by that time?
No, but I would say Emmanuel Macron has to come out with a prime minister choice by the end of the week. He can't wait that much. And political parties who are ready to govern has to say publicly that they are ready for a coalition. If it doesn't materialize in the coming 10 days, then the country is in big trouble.
Gérald Olivier's statement from the presidential palace, which seems to confirm what Richard Verly just said, a new prime minister, quote, in the coming days.
Yeah, well, we'll see if he's nominated and is able to get a majority himself. So, to go back to your original question, what should happen? Dissolution of the Assembly, new elections. And Macron picks the leader of the party that wins the election and governs with him in a cohabitation environment if necessary. And if no majority shows up out of those parliamentary elections, he should resign and we should have a new presidential election.
Yves Saint-Omer.
What should?
And what will happen is he will find somebody from a coalition the way my colleague was describing earlier.
What should happen? Elections, no. Either presidential or parliamentary elections, and within a year, a change of the system. What will? The mess will go on.
I pretty much agree with him. I think the president, who loves being the element of surprise, is going to think of the best way to surprise everybody and the best way for him to actually look stronger. But I would actually I'm not very much sure he would dissolve Parliament, but I think the best thing to do would be to dissolve Parliament, have elections, and maybe have, presidential elections if he decides it's time. But I think what he's going to aim for is actually governments that are strong enough to stand until 2027, but not strong enough to actually govern.
All right, well, mess is our specialty, and we'll be continuing to cover it. Hinzia, and I want to thank you. I want to thank as well
My pleasure.
Yves Saint-Omer, Richard Verly, Gérald Olivier. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. All right.